Today I'm presenting my thesis defense on prompting dialogue. This thesis is about advancing human AI communication through interdisciplinary insights. So today's agenda will be going, before I announce the agenda, there's a QR code. You can scan that to get a link tree. In there, there's a chat bot where you can have a conversation with my thesis. You can also find my thesis there. You can find these slideshows there, as well as other resources, as well as a Discord, and my LinkedIn is available on the link tree. Today we'll be doing introduction, going over mostly my methodology, my research, how I did my research, how I conducted it. We'll be going over key findings, strategic insights, implications, and lastly, recommendations. So I'm Jonathan Kyle Hobson. I'm a master's student, currently an AI analyst for Arizona State University. Welcome to the presentation. So before I get started, I want to kind of illuminate the dialogue that we're going to be having today. And I want to make sure everyone understands what these terms I'll be using are. So AI, in the bare essence of it, is a simulation of human intelligence processed by machines. So it's trying to duplicate human intelligence in some capacity. Whether or not it's achieving that is a different story, but it's attempting to do so. What prompting in AI is a dialogue with these AI systems designed to elicit specific actions, designed to give you an output. It's an input and an output using natural language, using English or any kind of natural human language. So you're not using numbers or code or some kind of Python code. You're just using natural language. And the generative AI or large language models are systems designed to generate new content. Large language models, it's specifically text, natural language, but generative AI could be images, music, it could be video, it could be anything. They all operate differently. Primarily, we're talking about large language models today, but generative AI, you also have to prompt in some cases, in many cases. So the goal of my study was to study the field of prompting, not necessarily to analyze the best practices, because the technology is changing at such a rapid rate. It would almost be a waste of my time to study what is working best, because the technology will always be evolving and there will always be a change to your prompts as the systems change, whether for the bad or for good. Your prompting will always need to adapt to the systems and technology. So it's more so to study the field of prompting. This emerging field of prompt engineering is what it's mostly well known as. It analyzed prompting practices, patterns, relationships, key terms, jargon, right, within this field. What terms are emerging that can support this field? Whether those terms come from a pre-existing field, or they're brand new terms, or they come from engineering. So I created a glossary of terms. The scope was looking at interdisciplinary contributes, looking at what other industries can contribute to this field, looking at what conversational design, psychology, all these different industries and what they can bring to this field of prompting. And then to study prompt construction. What does it look like when someone makes a prompt, develops a prompt? What does it look like? And the bare essence of that is, how do humans communicate to other humans? How do humans write instructions, process through instructions, and provide instructions? Whether or not from AI, this could almost enlighten human-to-human communication as well. And then study the usability of that. How do we design usable prompts, or how do we allow users who aren't good at prompting to prompt? So kind of studying the usability aspects and how it relates as the research approach of a user experience. I'm a user experience researcher, human experience researcher, and so this research came from that perspective. Major findings were the evolution of AI terminology, how terms evolve, and the synthesis of prompt strategies. So there are three core areas or themes and strategies that came out of my research. The three core areas will kind of touch on all of these aspects, but the areas are kind of the areas I covered: usability, interdisciplinary, and values, very important. And then the core themes was all my research of the frameworks and methodologies broke down and shared these three core themes in common: goal orientation, contextualization, and adaptability. The three core strategies are the most common strategies seen the people utilized. They're not necessarily the most effective, but they're the most common strategies, prompting strategies seen that people have utilized or utilized in their prompts, which are goals, templates, and reflective. And we won't go too much into what those are today, but you can you can research further on those. So this is my synthesized methodology. So a big part of my research was gathering other sources, bringing in other sources, and combining interdisciplinary sources, academic sources, non-academic sources were very key to my research, as this is a very fast-paced, growing field. I needed to bring in something that kept up with what people were thinking about this industry, and that related to the layman individual, that related to the casual prompter, related to the enthusiast prompter, right? Those are the people that are going to be professionals in this industry as it grows. So I needed to connect with them. So 87, I had 87 sources that I brought together and analyzed. I used diverse sources, multifaceted insights on AI communication coming from academic journals, digital content, social media, and personal communications, interviews, etc. And all of this research, including what you'll see in a second, my survey design and my interviews and usability tests, were all used to develop a taxonomy, a glossary, a development of methodology, development of prompting, analyzing developing prompting a lexicon. And so I had 700 total terms roughly that I analyzed. 100 terms made it into my thesis and were discussed and evaluated in my thesis some capacity. And those terms broke down to 16 frameworks, methods, 8 sayings, proverbs, 6 types of prompts, 31 prompt strategies, and then 10 multi-prompt strategies and 13 meta-prompt strategies. All the rest of the words were just supporting terms to clarify this, or variations of these same concepts. So my third big part of my research was a survey. And this survey was designed to evaluate what people in the audience of prompters that range from casual prompters, enthusiast prompters, professional prompters that consider themselves either experienced users of prompting or professionals in this industry, whether they labeled themselves as prompt engineering, prompt architects, prompt artists, prompt designers, whatever they labeled themselves as. That was my audience, those who interacted with AI, those who were passionate or were merging into human AI communication. That was my audience. And I built a survey for that audience, which collected 259 participants. 180 of them were in the target audience. About 160 of them ended up being fully valid or utilized in the final research. And these study, the goal of this was to study AI communication practices among prompters. Again, not what was the best possible solution for prompting, but what the what was people were using, right? Whether or not it was working, what people were using, and what the trends were, and what we were seeing. The scope is the interaction dynamics between prompters and AI, and then I gathered participants from LinkedIn, Slack, Discord, Reddit, Amazon, MTurk, and targeting advertising as well as direct academic outreach. And then another big part of my research was observational studies, usability tests, and interviews. This had 13 participants, 6 I observed, and 7 I conducted interviews with. And these, I observed communication, I observed them writing prompts, I observed them interacting with AI, I had them think aloud and talk through their process as they interacted with AI. I had interviewed them on similar questions to my survey, but slightly altered for interview discussion. And I gathered these individuals through a variety of different sources as well, and then conducted remotely via Zoom. And the tasks were task-driven, open-ended scenarios that ended up kind of being oftentimes a big discussion about how they prompting strategies, that I avoided misleading questions. You know, and I tried to gather their authentic viewpoints as I observed them interact with AI. And so through my surveys, my usability tests, my observations, my interviews, I developed 3 different personas, as well as several different prompting styles, which we'll get to in a second. But the personas broke down to efficiency-oriented, engaged, interactive, and creative explorer. There was one more persona I developed that was outside of my target audience that came from like synthesized research. But these three personas were the ones that I studied, that were in my target audience for this study. And they were all individuals who utilize AI in some kind. They're the early adopters of AI, right? They're in the early adopters phase. And so these personas were a combination of these prompting styles that I built out. So in my observation, I observed several different types of prompters or styles of prompting that people would utilize. Again, not necessarily effective strategies, but there were behavioral patterns that people utilize when interacting with these models. The first category was which is the most common among those who are not into AI and those who are into AI, are minimalist prompters. These people don't have time or don't have the education to know they need to write long prompts or engage in AI in a discussion, and they kind of do concise queries, speed focused, right? Then you have pragmatic prompters, contextual yet brief, detailed prompters, thorough and context target goals, iterative prompters, progressive dialogue and refinement. They have discussions. And we can see over on the side here that your minimalist prompters prefer those free models, right? They're not willing to invest in a paid model, right? Your minimalist prompters aren't investing in this with money, right? They're not investing this within time. They're not going to invest in money. So you can see that there's a kind of a breakdown on how many minimalist prompters or how much are free model users, or a majority of them are minimalist prompters. And we have explorative prompters who are open-ended, encourage brainstorming with the AI. You have contextual prompters. They are detailed and add a lot of context. Enthusiast prompters, complex prompts, intellectual engagement, and utility-driven, task-specific, and varying details as needed. And so you have different types of prompting styles that emerge from the research. And we can see here, this is a really interesting graph. And what we see here is really the emergence of this industry. And we see that only 6% of expert professionals and experienced users identify as being in this industry more than 3 years. There's a huge, there's not many people who have been in this industry or identify as a prompter in some capacity for more than 3 years, because this industry is so new. And there, you can see that a majority of people even are in there as less than 6 months, have been involved in prompting to some capacity. And this is because the industry is so incredibly new. Prompting is just emerging just very recently. I would argue that we are in a revolution right now, just like the digital revolution, just like the industrial revolution. We are currently in the AI revolution, and it's literally started less than a year ago. And we can see this by this chart on Google Trends. This is the Google Trends chart of the search terms of prompt engineering and OpenAI. And we can see that that it just gained popularity in basically January of 2023. So it's a very fresh industry and very new. And this is why a big importance of my research gathering was equally non-academic research as well as academic research in order to support this speed of this emerging trend. In addition to prompting styles, I asked individuals how they label themselves in the field of prompting. Now, I know prompt engineering is the emerging most popular term for this field of prompting, but it isn't necessarily the field that it's not inclusive enough, right? It isn't necessarily the term we should use. And so I asked people the nomenclature of how they would label themselves. And so we have prompt developer, casual prompter, prompt engineer, prompt architect, prompt enthusiast, prompt artist. And this was used not only to identify my target audience, but also to figure out where people aligned with in regards to that, but also to figure out if they really aligned with prompt engineering, if prompt engineering really resonated with people, or if there's a different term that in this emerging industry we should be using to identify our emerging industry, the field of prompting. And then again, this kind of graph shows the disconnect between prompt engineering and non-technical industries. So we see that 50% of non-technical industries prefer prompt architect over prompt engineering. Only 21% of non-technical industries prefer. So I asked people what their profession was, and then broke that down between technical industries and non-technical industries. Technical industries being engineers, IT, computer programmers, software engineers. etc. And then non-technical being pretty much anything else, mostly creative industries. And you can see a breakdown here of their preference level. And then we can see over here that we have experts prefer prompt developer over prompt engineers. We see that 43% of expert professionals prefer prompt developer, and only 15% of expert professionals prefer prompt engineer. And so earlier I mentioned core themes that came out. And so I studied, a big part of my studying was synthesizing all these different methodologies, frameworks, right, that existed to help people build prompts. The frameworks are used for prompt development to figure out what you need in your prompt to make your prompt successful, to make your input match your output, to make your input construct the output that you want, right? And the core themes of that were context, goal, and adaptability. Context is all about asking what is essential, what is important, why is it important, why is it essential, how will this enhance the outcome, and who is the audience, right? These are questions that people ask when they're writing their prompts, that they have to ask themselves either to craft a good prompt or just in general, those who are crafting professional prompts are asking these questions. Goal is, what is the primary task? Are there other tasks? Why is this critical? Why are these critical to the end result? How will I measure the end result? How will I measure success? And who is responsible? And you can see a recurring theme of audience across all these questions. And adaptability, I almost think this is like really important in that fact that even though context and goal are more important to a better output, adaptability isn't given enough credit, right? And this is the idea that we need other interdisciplinaries in this field. So what disciplines are you addressing? What subject area is your prompt in, essentially? Why is there balance? How are you balancing the structure, the format, the keywords, the strategies you're using? How do you use neurodivergence, right? These models think like neurodivergent individuals, and how do you think divergently? And then who benefits from these thinking structures, these reasoning models you use? So this quote I really love, and it's basically saying, it talks about how language is ambiguous. So it kind of tells you that these models don't have everything, right? They need context to understand what you're saying, because they don't have a time of day. They don't know these different areas. So this quote is saying, do you want coffee? And then if I say, oh, coffee will keep me awake, well, then it really depends on the time of day if I want coffee or not. And so it kind of emphasizes the ambiguity of our language that we take for granted day to day, because we are aware, maybe subconsciously or consciously, of all these various factors: body language, surroundings, location, time of day, various things. So it brings in that. And this other quote also iterates that. This is a poem. And so you can see I use a variety of experts from different age ranges, not only experts that are seen experts in academic or the industry, but also experts who are writers and poets, right? And this one really brings out the same kind of idea that context is important, but not just context, intent, perspective are also equally important, right? And that's not how we kind of misinterpret this half empty, half glass, half full analogy, and we think of it as pessimism versus optimism, but in reality, it's about perspective and about situation and context. Sorry, I got a message. Okay. Yeah, so this quote really emphasizes that. Don't forget that the perspective is deeply affected by our experience. So dig deep, ask questions, and don't assume that everyone's glass is the same. And so all of this breaks down, the three core themes break down the core area of values. These systems, this term I developed myself, is called, these AI systems are zero value systems, which I define as these systems being billions of values while at the same time having no inherent value. They have no particular value of their own. They only have the values imposed on them by their training data and by the company who's developed these models. And every interaction you have with these models, what you're really trying to do is not create you're trying to create a good output, but in addition to that, what you're really trying to do is have your output match your values. Not necessarily the best output for the situation, right? but the output that you value as an individual or that you value in your work or system, right? And so it's important to set ethos, set values to guide AI, right? To know yourself, to know your situation, to know your discipline, to know why you're prompting. It's important to use goal orientation over task guidance. It's important to think of these models as transformative rather than generative. My research found that a majority of people thought these technologies as generative technologies because in their name, but in reality, where the tech stands right now, they're more of transformative tech. They're more of taking words and translating it. And then context and examples are very powerful. And so this quote that comes from a game designer who developed a game system says context, intent, impact, and perspective are all required for sound judgments. So how you form AI and what's the most important to us and most important in the task we're trying to achieve. And so then we're kind of closing up here soon, but kind of the retrospective research, we want to emphasize context awareness, diverse discipline, the dialogue, crucial, the nuances of prompts. Prompting are essential conduits. AI weaves as essence for the tapestry of human endeavor. And then emerging trends are AI in our daily life, shift from command-based interactions to conversations, to partnerships, to collaboration, insert equity, access to AI technology, and adapt strategies culturally and sensitive and inclusive. And then my limitations were I struggled. I never had done a survey this large before with this many participants. So I struggled kind of crafting the survey. There was a lot of mistakes I made early on in the survey. I had an iterative design, which ruined some of my earlier participants' data that I collected from them. There was one question that was sort of leading or biased or kind of confusing that kind of ruined some of my data that I collected. So I would want to future design considerations. I want to make sure that my questions are all not misleading. I want to have a better test structure for my survey, a better ensuring that it's good. And then also when I was collecting that data from that survey, I realized I didn't think about the interconnectedness of the questions as much as I should have. So it was difficult to compare two questions together. And I could have made that a little bit easier by thinking about the relationship between two questions post survey and kind of thinking about how I'm going to connect them a little bit more. And so all of these were kind of considerations and challenges that affected my study. And then this is a final slide. So the key takeaway is the mastery of prompting leads to rich, meaningful exchanges. Cross-disciplinary perspectives are essential. Knowing your own values are essential. Knowing the values of the prompt you're trying to develop, the interaction you're trying to have is essential. Knowing the output of what you value in the output is essentially what I'm saying. And encourage the information. I call to action that I encourage people to have formate forms, talk to other prompters, educate the public to unlock the full potential, share this research with people and share and prepare for the future and to realize that we are in an evolution and that prompting is going to become as popular or as common as using Word or email. And yeah, that's it. Oh, I guess we had 30 minutes. I went a little fast.
No, that's great. Fantastic. I want to open it up to questions. Anyone on the call is welcome to ask. I don't mind starting. I have a question. You were talking about some prompting structures, and one of your points was this transformative over generative in terms of the structure of the prompting. I would love you to expand on that a little bit more if you have an example.
Yeah, definitely. So what that means really is that if you use the tool as a generative tech, which it can be beneficial, you risk failure modes, right? You risk hallucinations, you risk misinformation, right? And the power of these models rely in their ability to translate anything you say into something else, right? Into either a different format, a different style, a different translation, a different language, right? A different layman's versus professional writing, right? And really utilizing it. So a perfect example of this is how I wrote my thesis, right? Instead of typing, I talked everything. My whole thesis was talked pretty much how it's written into the AI, and the AI reformatted it, organized it, adjusted it, right? Keeping my ideas intact, keeping what I told it intact, and utilize that to transform it, right, into something new. And so it's about kind of using the tool as a transformative tech. It's more reliable, at least in the industry right now. Now, overnight, this could change, right? The technology could improve. But as of right now in the industry, it's a powerful transformative technology if you're thinking from a business perspective, right? Rather than a generative technology, it's unreliable in that regard. In a business perspective, it can make mistakes, even if it's 90% of the time correct. What is your cost of failure, right? And you got to consider that. And if it makes a mistake, then you're kind of liable for that. So thinking of it more of the transformative technology can allow us to make tools that are more user friendly and have less risk for mistake. I think I have an example over here. But yeah, I think I have an example in my thesis that I could show as well. But yeah, you can give me another question if you want when I look for this.
I have a question for you, Kyle.
Mhm.
So first off, this is great. Love the excitement and the energy. Clearly, this is a topic you're passionate about, and clearly I'm with you. I think this is like the next big wave, like the AI revolution. This is great. Had a specific question around what your thesis may lend from the research you've done towards moving towards large action models. So instead of it being like a basic prompt and kind of going through the daisy chain of refining a prompt that refines a prompt and kind of that RAG model into something where I can ask it something very generic like, hey, you know what? Start a business and you got $50, go figure it out. And then it goes and follows through and actually does the action and all the subsequent steps. So just curious what you found from your research and how that might translate to that sort of future scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I identify what you're talking about as is either the third wave or third system of AI slash natural conversation processing. So currently the models are great at natural language processing, but they lack in natural conversation processing. So a big part of become large action models, like you're saying, first of all, they would need to become better at natural conversation processing, which we're already seeing, right? And they need to go into that third system of AI, which means they can pick up on nuances and context and kind of like just like at a human level, right? Or at a natural level, a neurotypical level. They can understand a neurotypical. Right now, they're very neurodivergent currently. But in addition to that, they need to become multimodal, right? So that requires them to swarm together and for multiple agents to be able to do multiple different tasks. Because as you're talking about, it requires them to understand the world on more than just a level of language, but also a level of visual level, an auditory level, right? Based on whatever actions they need to commit, right? And so a big part of that is swarms or agents, right? Will be a big part of that. Multiple AIs conducting themselves and managing themselves, maybe with human oversight. And so then the prompter's role becomes one of more of an oversight role. And one of also of even in that third system of AI, you need to unlock that potential, right? If you just told it to go do that, you still have to bring in ideas, right? You still need that brainstorming of what that idea looks like. And so that's where like human can come in and contribute, whether or not the AI could be equally as good at that brainstorming or ideation or creativity. It doesn't matter because it's always good to have unique perspectives and different viewpoints to a matter, right? And so then the prompter's role becomes one of collaboration and one where you're working with the idea, with the machine to advance your ideas and also listen to its ideas and work with it as a partner in the action it's committing, and then oversight all these different agents and swarms as they work together to develop your task.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle.
Here is that example of transformative prompt. So in this particular case, I wanted to send an email and I wanted to share the Zoom link and this. And so I had it, this was for an event that I ran. And so I provided all the information needed for this email and I wanted to write it in HTML and then outputted a perfect HTML output with all the information included in it. That's a transformative process. There's three processes that these models are good at: transformative operations, generative operations, and reductive operations. With transformative, from my research, showing as the most potential currently, but people mostly know generative or use AI a lot for generative tasks.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Any other questions? Looks like we got one here.
Hi, thank you, Kyle. This is very exciting and great presentation. Love the passion. I had a question regarding the mode of interface, like how the people you work with and your participants, if you use different modes of interaction, if they, if some people use just speech or people just use, interfacing with a computer to interface with the AI, and if you have any insight in how each different mode, bears different results or induces specific expectations in the participants and in the human.
Yeah, great question. So all of my interview and observational study participants used text entry. None of them declared that they used voice or any other modal. Some of them said they used images or take picture of things and submitted that. Of my survey, I never asked a question like that, so I never collected that data. From outside of my participants, I only know of about 3 or 4 people who use other modems of interaction, including myself, who uses speech to interact with it, but the majority of people are using text. And I think that's because, and this kind of goes beyond my research and more of a hypothesis. I think that's because people have bad experiences with speech, right? They don't have good experience in that kind of interaction because historically it hasn't been a good method of interacting. It's misinterpreted you or not being able to understand you in some capacity. But I argue from my personal experience and those I have seen use, which again, not outside of my research slightly, but that speech, it has improved, especially like Whisper and AI's speech recognition has dramatically improved and now recognizes you based on context, and you can tell it something and it will change the spelling of it based on context, based on what you say, right? And it's very powerful. And I would say that, again, it's more of a hypothesis, but I would say the answer to your question is that speech would allow people to provide more context at a faster speed and quicker. It might turn some of those, if you brought some of those minimalist prompters onto speech, it might bring them from a minimalist prompter to a more enthusiastic or detailed or context prompter if you showed them this modal of interface, right? But I know people who, there's also like within speech, there's 2 different types of modal interface, right? You have those who talk to the AI and have a back and forth conversation. Then you have those who just turn on their mic and record what they're saying and do speech to text and then send it to the AI. And both of those are, one's a collaborative process. You can give a lot of context through a collaborative dialogue. And the other one is like you can talk for 10 minutes, what I do, and then give a lot of information through that speaking, that modal. But again, a lot of that is like maybe set for future research and needs more investigation.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, continue to ask questions. I'm gonna take myself to a breakout room for 5 minutes or so and organize my thoughts and notes. Then I'll come back and we'll have a little conclusion discussion. So feel free to stick around and chat. I will be right back. Open this. Okay.
I have to hop off, but thank you. It was great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So Kyle, when I use AI, I always talk. I don't really ask it a question generally by typing in. Is that, which model would that be then?
In regards to like what Ali said, is that what you're discussing?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So what modal that would be that speech modal, right? You're utilizing speech to discuss with it, talk with it, to share your ideas, and you're communicating through speech. Another really great aspect to your question, Ali, earlier is that we're transitioning, and it'll take a while, but we're transitioning to brain. So eventually, the modal of just thinking will be a form of communication to the AI, and be a form of way of communicating your thoughts to it directly through it interpreting your brain waves rather than you having to speak or type. So there's actually another modal there. And then you also have body language, which is a modem that I think is a modal that's oftentimes underutilized, right? That potentially these multimodal models that Brent talked about will eventually need that ability to maybe understand body language or situational awareness, right? And so we have other potential outlets of communicating with it. But yeah, what you do is back and forth conversation with these models, which is that in dialogue, right? And that's really great. I think it's a again, it's my hypothesis, but I think it's a better method of providing context to the model because it allows people are it's easier to speak. I would argue for a majority of people. The people that I did observe, I did ask them, my 13 participants, I did ask them why they didn't use voice. And oftentimes they said, oh, they weren't aware of technology was one reason. Another reason was they prefer to kind of think through their process. They thought through it. They didn't think they could talk out loud. So a lot of people, I think that there could be another hypothesis said that speaking to these modals, like I do, for example, require you to have a certain understanding of how you think through the process or be used to it, and a lot of people don't have that kind of, either they don't think that fast, maybe they need time to think through what they're doing, or they're not used to it, right? Because that could be another potential hindrance to a speaking interface. Because I'm a biased participant when it comes to speaking, because I'm a great improver. So speaking becomes a little bit natural. Sharing my thoughts or ideas become a little bit more natural to me. VJ, you may want to mute yourself.
Okay, I'm trying.
But we're just asking questions from the audience. My professor went out to gather their notes, and the audience is asking questions right now. So we're towards the end of the presentation.
Well, I had a question.
Okay, yeah. What's your question?
So in your research, I assume that you're using like a higher version of AI, whatever you're using. Like, I don't know if you're using the chat thing that you told me about. So I'm still at the beginning version of using AI, and I'm still at the not having the highest version. So when do I have to switch to get a new version, or is the beginning version going to be okay for me to interact with?
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is that you're using the free version of ChatGPT versus like a paid version. The majority of my observed and interviewed participants utilize the paid version, right? Utilize the free version of ChatGPT, which is like I think what you're referring to, which I was trying to show that statistic. Yeah, the free version is just as can be just as effective, right? It's a little bit technology is always advancing, and I would strongly recommend the paid version if you find any value in the system, as it's exponentially better or stronger, and especially if you're using it for more complex processes or using it more frequently, right? But the free version can suffice if you kind of have strategies in place and you realize and you're evaluating the outputs and it's working in your workflow. The free version can work. But we can see here that 62% of my usability tests utilize the free version of ChatGPT, while only 37% invested in a paid model. So this free versus paid. But also only 25% were daily users, right? So it really depends on how frequently you're using these models and how it works in your workflow. I would recommend a paid model as output improvement is drastic, but you can get a decent improvement. Like for example, the chatbot that I provided a QR code in the beginning of the presentation. The chatbot, which is powered by, utilizes Claude 3 Haiku, which is a free model, which is a well, I have like 100,000 tokens a month for free. So, which is like one use for that chatbot. You ask one question, up 2,000 tokens. So,
Thank you.
yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Looks like I had to move up.
Any other questions? In this QR code, you can also find this glossary of terms, which is not refined right now. It's kind of messy, but this is all the collection of all the terms that I analyzed in the process of the research related to prompting. And my glossary terms were determined by their relevance to the industry of prompting. So I do have some technical terms that discuss like the flow of how these models operate behind the scenes, but only from the perspective of understanding what happens to your prompt when you send it in, and not necessarily. I purposely try to avoid too things irrelevant from that. You know, what I set to see as field as prompting.
Hey, Kyle, I have a question for you.
Yeah, but
yes, kind of expanding a little bit on what Brent's question was, you know, where is this going and how can it advance and take into, you know, additional considerations so you don't have to spoon feed it or, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, if you just look at the non-AI world, historically, human-to-human interface has been very misinterpreted and had issues, right? People don't understand each other. Miscommunication happens all the time. Do you see, you know, the human to AI interface as, you know, reaching some of those challenges and maybe going beyond what we're able to do just in the normal world with human to human people, that where we have constant miscommunication going on?
yes, excellent question. Yeah, 100%. I think first of all, that's like the reason why prompters or this field will always be needed, right? Because no matter how good your communication modal gets or your communication gets, or how interpretive the AI gets, you're always going to have the risk of misinterpretation, because I mean, even brain interfaces will have that risk, right? And I think this, and then to answer your other part of your question, I think this will help. I honestly have a very pessimistic or optimistic view on AI, and I really think that this will help improve human to human interaction. I think these same principles that can be used in the field of prompting can be utilized in human to human interaction as well. And if we attempted to understand our own values, if we attempted to understand others' values, if we attempted to understand our societal values, our human values, and where they come from, then we can better align ourselves between each other and better if we try to understand the intent, the impact, and the perspective in the context of what someone is telling us, then we can improve human to human communication. And so I think that these models will help in that regard, just like by understanding the research behind this. But also I think these models have potential to help in mental health in general, and help people improve their communication skills just by having interactions with these models. So hopefully that answers your question, but it looks like my professor is back.
Yes,
I had a question.
thank you.
Yes, someone said something?
I said I had a question.
Go ahead.
So when I've used the GPT that you built for me, a lot of times it will give me like, that was sarcastic in tone, or that was, you know, you might want to use, you know, change your tone here, or change your tone there. How does that impact me? I'm the human, that's the AI. It's kind of telling me what they're perceiving my tone to be in my
Yeah, it's using analysis. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but the sentiment analysis is basically the idea of analyzing text to determine to try to determine intent and there's certain phrases or themes in language that emphasize certain types of intent, and these AIs are really, really good at picking up on those what could be said in text, right? But there's still other outside of just the text itself that can determine if what the tone of something is, right? And that the AI doesn't necessarily know. So unless you're communicating to the AI, this is the situation, this is where I'm posting it, this is why I'm posting it, it may not have all that context. And so it's just purely getting that sentiment analysis from the text, and it's recognizing that certain themes in the text are expressing this emotion and expressing this intent, and so that's what it's going off of, and it does a really good job with that. But of course, it can be wrong. That's a generative capability that's occurring there. It's evaluating the text and determining what it. There's a little bit of transformation there happening. It's a little bit of a mix of generative and transformation that's occurring when it's doing that. But it's an evaluating process, and it can be really good at evaluation, but it can get things wrong if it doesn't have enough info.
Wow. So on the one that you built for me, I just have to give it more information. If I'm trying to use that tone, I just need to say, no, I want this tone to be there.
Yeah, definitely. You can communicate with it and explain your reasoning and protect it and have it explain itself. Say, hey, why do you think this, or what is your reasoning behind this? And it may give you some additional information on why it thinks that.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Are there any other questions? I don't want to cut anybody off. We do have a little bit of time. All right, perfect. Well, Kyle, first of all, amazing job. AI is something that is not going away. It's just going to become more nuanced and embedded into our lives. And as you've identified, there's still a lot to learn here, right? There's a lot of opportunities for more research to answer more questions. And I found it really interesting specifically that you identified things like prompter types to help us understand how people are using AI currently, and even going further to declare like the best ways of using AI, right? I certainly learned quite a bit today. So your presentation helped me do that because it was really visually driven. There was a lot of good data visualizations to help me understand the results of your research in a really bite-sized way. So thank you for doing that. You designed this well. One thing that others have said that I absolutely agree with is your passion for this. I saw that from the moment this project came to life. And just let everyone know, we've met bi-weekly since we started this project just to figure out what's going next with the research, how the research is going. Oh, we've hit a snag here. Oh, how does this sound, right? So I've been close to it. I've still learned a lot today because again, this is so nuanced and this world is just ever changing. But I think what really sets you apart, Kyle, is your genuine interest for making a difference and making an impact with this research. So you really delivered here. So I hope that you take that away from this. And I also hope that you publish this research because I think the community can take advantage of it. AI is a topic that people are currently really divided on, right? People are either embracing it or they're scared of it. And I think this research helps us to understand AI a little bit more and hopefully making those that are scared of it feel a little bit more comfortable. So I really do hope that you go on to publish your research.